The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Okay, the story I'm going to tell you is an African folk tale, and it is called the Owangalima tree. Now, once in Africa, it hadn't rained for a long, long time. The grass was turning brown and withered. The trees weren't bearing fruit. The animals were starving. They were all so hungry. A group of 4 of them got together and began to talk with each other and said, "What are we going to do? We haven't eaten in so long, and the trees aren't bearing fruit the way they usually do. We're so hungry. There must be something we can do." And Lion spoke up and he said, "You know, I heard once about a magic tree not far from here. And all you'll have to do is find this magic tree, stand under the tree, and speak up into the tree and say its name. And magic will happen and fruit will grow on the tree." Well, his friends were so excited. They said, "This is wonderful. Where can we find this tree? Let's try. What have we got to lose?" So they decided they would do this. And the 4 friends got up and they went walking. And they walked and they walked and they walked. And they came to a big valley. There wasn't much in the valley, and even there the grass was all withered. And there was one tree in the middle of this valley, one huge tree. And they said, "This must be it. This must be the magic tree." And they ran over to the tree and they stood under the tree and they looked up into his branches and they said, "What's the name of the tree?" And nobody knew. They looked at each other and they said, "Well, here we are. Now we need to know the name of the tree to work its magic. What should we do?" Well, Cheetah spoke up. And Cheetah said, "You know, I know that there is a great mountain spirit, and the mountain spirit knows everything. I bet if I run real fast and run to the magic spirit, the mountain spirit will tell us what the name of the tree is." And they all said, "Okay, it's worth a try. Go quickly." And he said, "Of course I go quickly. I'm the fastest one here." And he ran and ran and ran until he came to the big mountain. And he ran up the mountain and he sang, "Mountain spirit, speak to me. Tell me the name of the magic tree." And the ground shook and the mountain rumbled and the great mountain spirit said, "Owangalima." Owangalima. Owangalima. Oh, good. I can remember that. And the cheetah ran down the mountain and ran all the way back to his friends, except that before he got to his friends, there was suddenly a big anthill in the road, and he fell over the anthill, and he knocked his head and knocked the name of the magic tree right out of his head. Well, he went up to his friends and he said, I'm so sorry. I had the name of the magic tree, but I lost it. It fell out of my head." Oh, and his friends were so disappointed, and they said, "What are we going to do now?" Well, Lion spoke up and Lion said, "Well, I am the bravest one here. I will go and speak to the mountain spirit. I will be able to remember the name." So they said goodbye to Lion, and Lion ran all the way to the mountain, and he ran up the mountain. And when he got to the top of the mountain, he said, "Mountain spirit, speak to me. Tell me the name of the magic tree." And the ground shook, and the mountain rumbled, and the mountain spirit said, "Owangalima." And Lion said, "Owangalima, Owangalima. Okay, I got it, thanks." And he ran down the mountain and he ran back to his friends. But just before he made it back to his friends, there was this big giant anthill, and he tripped over it and fell, and the name of the magic tree got knocked right out of his head. Well, he went up to his friends and he said, "I'm so sorry. I knew it, I did, but it got knocked right out of my head, and now I don't remember what it was." And his friends were so disappointed. Well, the musk ox stood up. And the musk ox said, I am the strongest one here. I will go to see the mountain spirit and find out the name of the magic tree. So they said goodbye to him, and musk ox lumbered on his way all the way to the mountain, and he climbed the mountain, and he said, Mountain spirit, speak to me. Tell me the name of the magic tree. And the ground shook, and the mountain rumbled, and the mountain spirit said, Awangalima. Awangalima, okay, I got it, thanks. And he lumbered back down the mountain, and he lumbered on to his friends, but before he reached his friends, there was a giant anthill, and he tripped over it, and the name of the magic tree got knocked right out of his head. Well, he went up to his friends, and he said, I'm so sorry, I had the name of the tree, I had it, and I lost it. And his friends were so disappointed. Well, the only one left was Tortoise. They looked at Tortoise, and Tortoise looked at them and shrugged. And they said, well, we know it's going to take you a long time, but you're the only one left. You're our only hope. Please, Tortoise, will you try? And Tortoise said, yep, I'll go. I'll go as fast as I can. And so they said goodbye, and Tortoise went walking on his way. And he walked, 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 and he walked. And he finally got to the mountain, and he climbed up the mountain. And when he finally got to the top, he sang, Mountain spirit, speak to me. Tell me the name of the magic tree. And the ground shook, and the mountain rumbled, and the mountain spirit said, Awangalima. And the tortoise said to himself, Awangalima, Awangalima. And as he walked down the mountain, on every step, he repeated to himself, Awangalima, Awangalima. And on every step, all the way back to his friends, he said, Awangalima, Awangalima. You could do it with me.
Awangalima,
Awangalima. And he saw up ahead a giant anthill, but he was walking slowly enough that he saw it ahead of him and walked around it, still saying, Awangalima, Awangalima. And finally he got back to his friends, and he said to them, Awangalima. And his friends were so excited, and they gathered again under the tree, and they looked up into its branches, and they all said, Awangalima. And suddenly the magic started happening. The buds opened up and turned into flowers, and the flowers opened up and turned into fruit, the most wonderful fruit you can ever imagine. All kinds of fruit, because it was a magical tree. There were pears, and there were apples, and there were plums, and there were even pineapples, all kinds of fruit growing on this tree. And the four friends took the fruit, and they ate, and they ate, and they ate, and they called out for as far and as wide as they could for all the other animals to come and eat from this magic tree. And all the animals gathered around and ate all the fruit they could eat, and it was wonderful. And they never forgot the name of that magic tree. So the next time there was a drought, they could work the magic again. Will you remember the name of the magic tree?
Awangalima.
The end.
Oh. How do you establish a tradition in your family? How do you establish a tradition? And what is a tradition? Literally, the root of the word tradition is, in Latin, is to literally hand over. Dite is the fingers, to hand over. So when you establish a tradition, you're literally handing something on. For example, many people probably hang their Christmas stockings in a place that's very similar to they hung them on the door, in their own home as a kid. If they were on the doorway of their bedroom or over the mantle of the fireplace or wherever, that's a certain tradition. And who sits where during Thanksgiving dinner is a tradition. And this is a story that happens to be about establishing a tradition in the Doolittle family. In one of my lives, for many years, I've been a chaplain volunteer at Albany Medical Center. And the director of pastoral care there, Harlan Ratmeyer, is a good friend and a storyteller. And we were having coffee together before Thanksgiving, soon after Harlan had moved back to take the job at Albany Med. He had been our interim minister in Schenectady. And we're having coffee, so I said to him, Harlan, how about coming to Thanksgiving dinner? He says, oh no, I think I'm going to go to the Mathises' house. Now, the Mathises are members of our church who tragically had lost a college-age daughter to leukemia when we were benefiting by having Harlan be our intern. And Harlan left that interim role because we got a full-time minister and kept in touch with the Mathis family. And came back and actually did her memorial service. It was quite touching, quite sad. But I said, so you're going back to the Mathises for Thanksgiving? And he said, yeah, and I'll sit in Jossie's place. And I said, you're going to sit in Jossie's place? How do you know it's Jossie's place? He said, well, Jan, the mom, she has a tablecloth, and for every holiday they have a tablecloth, and the people who sit at a certain place trace their hands on the tablecloth, and then she goes over it in needlepoint on her sewing machine, and she puts the date and the initials. So when I go to Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to sit where Jossie sat from the time she was 4 until the Thanksgiving before she died, because her hands are there. Wow. Well, I was awed. And we talked a little bit more, and then we went our ways for the day. But when I got home that night, I said, I got this great story. And I told my wife, that beloved Gay, that story. And she looks at me and she said, gee whiz, that's great. We ought to make one for your mother. Well, my mother was 94 years old. And my mother's birthday is Christmas Day. So we've always been challenged to do the birthday and the Christmas thing, and it's been a little tension. Now I got to back up because there's a certain tension between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And I got to say that in my experience with my wife and my mother, it could be a capital T at times. It could be that way. So I looked at her and I said, you really want to do this? She says, I think I really do. I think it would be really nice. And people are coming here for Thanksgiving, so people could trace their hands and maybe do a little messagey thing. And I don't think I could needlepoint it, but I got a lot of calico left over from another project. I can get some more. And why don't we go out and buy a nice blue tablecloth as the background? That's her favorite color. So we did. Now, people did come to our house for Thanksgiving, and my mother was there, but in the kitchen and in the dining room, but I was secreting people into my office where they would trace and, well, I was in awe that Gay was doing this. It was quite something. And some of the messages were kind of neat coming in, like, you're wonderful. You're the best grandmother. Wow. Well done. Our family is crazy. That came from one of our Valley Girl great-granddaughters in California. But they were really neat. About 2 weeks before Christmas, as Gay is getting the layout kind of settled, she says to me, Joe, it would be nice if we had your mother's hands in here. I said, my mother's hands? How am I going to get a trace of my mother's hands without blowing the... She says to me, that's not my problem. Yep. So I go over to my mother's apartment in her assisted living facility, and I explain to her that I need to have traces of her hands because my Sunday school class, which I didn't really have, but I told her I had, needed some old hands, and their hands were all little hands. So could I trace her hands? Which I thought was a pretty good way of doing it. And I brought them home. Now, one of our traditions as adults is that we kind of pass where Christmas is, like we pass where, and it was my older brother Larry's turn to host Christmas. And we went over to his house in Castleton, and we opened some presents, and then we had our dinner, and then we played Pictionary, and then it came time for the birthday part of the day. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon. And we get called to the cake. And we walk into the dining room, and there's nothing there but a blue tablecloth. Now, my mom's eyes weren't that good. And she looks around, "Where's the cake?" And then she sees the tablecloth. And my brother, the lawyer, begins to jump up and down like a 12-year-old and saying, Ma, look at the table, look at the table. It's our hands, Mom. It's all our hands. Happy birthday. And she came over and she began to look at these hands. Right here is the tablecloth. And they're all there. And she looks at them, and she looks over at my wife, and she says, "You did this for me, didn't you?" And Kay says, "Yes, I did, Mom. It's beautiful. Oh, I love you so much. And I love you, Mom." Now, at the time, 37 years of marriage, that's the only time I can ever recall hearing my mother and my wife say that they loved each other. And the tension went away, and the wonder went away, and the story has grown in the family as we've had new people added through marriage and birth. We've got little handprints on there.
Yes.
And it's been a wonderful tradition. And I've told this story. I've told this story many times because I really love to tell it. And I know of 6 other applications of hands on tablecloths for 50th wedding anniversaries, for significant birthdays, for other things. And the other carry forward from this is if you look at the middle of the tablecloth, in between those gnarled hands that are my mom's, is the phrase, "Blessed be the tie that binds." And as a kid visiting my grandparents on the farm in Northfield, Massachusetts, we go to the big old church. And at the end of the service, they would sing as a benediction, "Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above." And so we carry a tradition in our hearts and in our hands for the love of families. And I share that with you in hopes that it's caused some thoughts to stir in your mind and your heart, and maybe down the road with your hands.
This story is sword. Okay, you know this one? Okay. Once there was a king. He was a very good king. He cared about his people. He cared about his subjects and what they thought and how they felt and what they needed. And one day he decided he was up in his palace all the time. He couldn't really tell what his people needed from way up there. So he decided to disguise himself. And he dressed himself as a beggar and went out from the palace and down into his kingdom. And he walked through the streets and he talked to people and he met people, and of course they didn't know who he was, so they spoke to him as an ordinary person. And it became evening and he went into a part of his kingdom that was not such a good neighborhood, okay? It was the poorer part of town. And he made a mental note that he should have his people fix the streets. There were holes in the streets, and some of the houses were kind of ramshackle and falling down. And he made a note that he would send people to repair things and help out. And while he was walking, he heard singing. He heard a man's voice singing such a wonderful, happy song. And he peeked in the window of a house and he saw a man sitting down at his table about to eat his supper. There wasn't much on the table. There was a little bit of bread and a piece of cheese and a bottle of wine, but the man was sitting there singing joyfully. And he knocked on the door, and the man inside opened the door and said, "Oh, would you like to come in? You know, I see that you are needy. I'd love to have you come in." And the king, who looked like a beggar, said, "Oh, I don't want to bother you. I was just wondering. I hear you singing, and I'm wondering what makes you so happy." And the poor man said, "Oh, please, come in, come in. I don't have much, but I'll be happy to share with you." And so the king sat down with him at his table, and the man shared his meager meal with the king. And the king said, "How do you get money to earn to buy your food for this meal?" And the man said, "Well, I have some shoe polish that I made for myself and some rags, and I go into the town square every day and I shine people's shoes for them. And they pay me to shine their shoes, and I spend that money on food for the day. And I have enough to take care of me. I have enough to sustain me, and whatever happens, God will take care of me and I'll be fine. So I'm happy." Well, the king went home that night and he thought about it. He thought about what the man had said, and he decided to test the man, to test his happiness. He said, "Suppose something happens unexpected, what will this man do, and will he still be so happy?" So the next morning, an edict went out around the kingdom: no more shoe shining will be allowed. It is now against the law to make money shining people's shoes. From now on, everyone has to shine their own shoes. Well, he wondered what the poor man would do. So the poor man went out that day into the square, and he'd heard about the edict, and he knew he couldn't shine shoes, but he saw some people, some men, going out with axes, going into the forest to chop wood. And he asked if he could join them. And they said, "Certainly." So they gave him an axe, and he went out with them, and he chopped down some wood, and he brought back the wood and sold the wood and kept a little bit of it for himself, for his own fire. And he made enough money to buy his food for the day. And he went home. That evening, the king, dressed as a beggar, went out again and went to the same poor man's house. And he knocked on the door. And the poor man opened the door and said, "Oh, my friend, come in, share my meal with me again." And so the king did. And the king said to him, "I heard that it's now against the law to shine shoes. What did you do today to earn your food?" And so the man told him what he had done and how he had chopped wood for the day. And so that night the king went home and thought about it again. And the next day, a new law was that you could not go into the forest and chop trees. The forests were getting depleted. There weren't enough trees growing, and for now, no more chopping down of trees was going to be allowed. So that next day, the poor man went out and saw that he couldn't chop trees anymore. But he saw that the king had posted a sign saying that the king's guard needed people. So he signed up to be one of the king's guards. He thought, "I'll make some money that way." And they gave him a uniform to wear, and they gave him a beautiful shiny sword and a sheath to wear at his waist. And all day long he marched up and down alongside of the palace doing his job as a king's guard. Well, the next day he went back. That evening he went to accept his pay for being a king's guard. And he was told, "Oh, no, that's not the way it works. We don't pay our guards every day. You have to work for a week, and then we give you your pay at the end of the week." Well, what was the man to do? He went home, and he thought, "How am I going to buy my food for the next meal?" And he thought about it. And he took one of the pieces of wood that he had saved, and he carved out a perfect replica of his sword. And he took the sword, the real sword that he had been issued, and took it into the market square, and he sold it. And he made enough money on that sword for enough food for the entire week. And he put the wooden sword that he had made into his sheath. Well, the next day he went to the palace again and marched back and forth. And at one point, someone came up to him, one of the other guards, and said, "You, there, a man has broken the law. A man has stolen fruit from the trees in the palace garden. And this is against the law. You do not steal fruit from the king. This man should be put to death." That is the rule. That is the law. And since you are the newest guard, it is your job to kill this man. You need to chop off his head with your sword. Well, all the people gathered in the square to see the execution. And the poor man thought, what am I going to do? I no longer have a sword, and I don't want to chop off anyone's head anyway. This is terrible. But he thought about it. He was a very smart man, and he thought. And the moment came, the prisoner was brought before him and put down on his knees. And he was told, "Now is the time. You must chop off this prisoner's head." Well, the poor man thought for a moment, and he said, "I've never killed anyone before. I need some time. I need a moment to pray, to talk to God, and to ask forgiveness for what I am about to do." And he took a moment, and then he said in a voice loud enough for all the people to hear, "My God, I must do this thing. If this prisoner is truly guilty and deserves to be killed, may my sword strike true and kill this man in one cut, a painless way to die. But if this prisoner does not deserve to die for his crime, may my sword turn to wood." And he pulled out his sword. A gasp went up among the crowd, for indeed the sword had turned to wood. Well, the king looked at this, and the king started laughing. And the king went over to the poor man, and he introduced himself. He said, "I am the king, but you know me better as the beggar who has been coming to your house." Well, the poor man was shocked, and he was frightened. What's going to happen to me now? But the king laughed again and said, "You are so wise. You are the wisest person I've ever met. You know how to keep yourself happy no matter what happens, and you knew what to do in this situation. Will you please come live in the palace with me and be my advisor?" Of course, the poor man agreed, and he moved into the palace and lived with the king and was, as always, happy forever after.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again,